Hi, everyone. Thanks for making time to be in person in the boardroom, and we'll go live in just a few minutes. Has anyone heard from Aaron?
I have not heard from Aaron. I thought maybe he was gonna first, hard to keep track of everything. Maybe I did hear from Aaron. He was gonna join no, it was last night. He was not gonna attend, and glad he wasn't gonna create a quorum.
And I did listen last night, so I got to hear all of the discussion, which was good.
Well, thanks for the option for joining virtually. Today is Giving Tuesday, and in my role of fundraising at Seed Savers Exchange, this is a big, exciting day for us to help inspire donations.
Brad, at some point in time when my parents were at the farm, they locked a woodchuck in the garage.
Who got to be the fun person to find it?
Well, so they went back like a month later, and it came tearing out after him, still alive, and it had decided to chew up like all the electric cords. So there's a freezer out there,
Oh,
and it chewed up so the freezer was off.
oh,
There was a big bag of ice that we just had randomly on top, but everything was suspect because
yeah,
it sat for a long time.
Well, I don't think it electrocuted when they chew those cords, or do they?
probably the breakers. So
Or
Hi,
gave this one
Travis.
some-
Hello.
Welcome.
know.
Thanks for all your time today.
Yeah, no
But
problem.
that's one of the jobs you have to do when you leave the farm now. You have to walk through the garage and make sure there's no animals.
Okay, it's noon. So I will go ahead and call today's special board meeting to order. Taking roll call, please note that directors Sand, Fadness, and Darling are in person, and I'm joining virtually. And Director Zander may join virtually as well. We'll wait and see, but we do have enough for a quorum, so we'll go ahead and proceed. I'll read the mission and vision statement. At Decorah Community School District, we embrace student learning and well-being as our fundamental purpose. We will, in partnership with our students, families, and community, make the world a better place. The mission of the Decorah Community School District is learning, thriving, creating our legacy. The vision of the Decorah Community School District is Decorah Community School District will be a collaborative, innovative, learning-centered organization empowering students to embrace their personal strengths and create their future. And next, I'll wait for a motion to approve today's agenda.
So
A second.
Okay, hearing a motion and a second, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So the purpose of today's meeting is opening and considering sealed bids by superintendent, board secretary, and today we also have Travis Squires from Piper Sandler with us today. And we are ready to listen and learn about bids that were submitted by today's deadline and which were opened at 10 a.m. Tim, I know that you joined a meeting at 10. Is there anything that you'd like to include before we turn it over to Travis?
No, I'm excited, and I'm sure Travis will explain this. We seem to have some nicely competitive bids, so that's encouraging.
Great. Okay, over to you, Travis. Oh, you're muted.
Hopefully you can pick up my screen share.
Yes,
you guys
it looks
Yep.
great.
Okay, good. You'd think after like 5 years of Zoom meetings, you'd figure out how to not have the mute button on before you start talking. All right. Yeah, the funny part was is we got off the phone at like 10:10 and Tim's like, "You're gonna have this done, right, for our noon meeting?" I think I sensed a little hesitation. So, yeah, everything came together here in the last hour. Took a little bit of time as we were waiting to confirm a cost of issuance from the bond rating agency. But once we got that done, went pretty smooth. So I'll just walk through real quick. It's a little bit larger packet that you guys can peruse and look over a little bit more later. I'll try to keep this pretty brief. Just a little bit about the process, your debt structure here. We have a $1.8 million payment in year one. That's for principal and interest. That solves out for your levy from this last year at a $1.94, $1.95. The structured debt of the other maturities then is to plan for the remaining future debt issuance on this, which will have 28 million more to sell. Once we get new valuations in place after January, we'll work a little bit more on finalizing structure. In terms of like the official statement and bond rating, I know we hit on a little bit here, but do want to tip our cap to the work at Allers and Cooney for their work as disclosure counsel, guiding through that part of the process on the district's behalf. They did a nice job there. Bond rating, you did get a AA3 rating from Moody's, which we talked about last week. I think this was one notch higher than when the district sold bonds back in 2010. So a nice result there. Official statement's been out in the market over the past week with the bond rating. Investors had a chance to review. Your question would be, is that, not enough time? And I'd argue that, investors, even if you gave them 2 weeks, they're going to pick it up late the week before and look forward. There's $17 billion worth of supply in the market over the week across the nation. So there's a lot of things going on. They're picking them up as they see it. While a week is on the short end, it's not too short for investor attention, which is obviously what we saw today. So today's sale results, we had the bids due at 10 a.m. He had a nice result, 5 bids received, fell within the range of recent similar financings. We did just a small resizing on the issue. And then in terms of thinking about next steps, it's going to move pretty quick here. So we got today's meeting for sale approval, resolution at next week's meeting for issuance, and then closing, which doesn't require a board meeting, but you'll receive bond funds on 12/18. So that money will be available to be invested at that time. So a little bit on the bid results here. We did, as I mentioned, 5 bids. All fell within a pretty tight range from 3.919 or basically 3.92%, out to 3.99%. So very tight bidding. Typically, you see what we'd call kind of throwaway bids in there, and all of these were really pretty tight. So good to see. You'll see a little arrow and a note off to the right that says we did receive some correspondence from UMB Bank that indicated that Walk-On State Bank was assisting in their bidding process. I'll hit a quick pause here just because we received indication from UMB that one bank was assisting does not mean that other banks aren't involved or won't be involved. So I don't want there to be too much weight thrown into that indication from UMB Bank, but I also do want to make certain that it is made known that you did have some local participation. And really that is part of, the goal here of getting that structure of 10 million done this year, because it does make it more attractive for banks to participate. In terms of the bid itself, you'll note something just a little bit weird here. Our structure, we had bonds in 2026 and then 2039 to 2045. We structured this to try to take advantage of where we thought the most value was for bank qualification, as well as to fill out your levy here in this first year. You'll see coupon rates. So that's the rate that you'll pay the investor, 5% for the 2026 maturity, and then 4% for the rest of the maturities. One of the features of their bid is they are not only covering their issuance cost in terms of an underwriting fee, but also paying you a little bit more than face value on the bonds. So 10,089,000, so 90,000 of what we call premium. And that does help offset some of the issuance cost or cost of issuance on the bonds. So ultimately, you end up with just shy of 10 million of spendable project funds out of this issue. A little bit on the resizing. We just had to do something on that first maturity to solve within the levy limitation of 1.8 million. So we made that structure adjustment. Ultimately, your rate changed just slightly after resizing, 3.9198 instead of 3.9199, but really rate at about a 3.92%. In terms of what's next, and keep in mind, we've been working on a fluid target of, what's the latest project budget, what's the iteration. So don't get too caught up in the amount. We have just run some what I'll call kind of max scenarios that, what if you sold sales tax bonds and it did cash to support some of your project has been discussed at the board. None of this is final. None of this is meant to indicate that this is the level at which you're willing to go up to project funds, but just our latest scenario that we had run. If we were solving for a 45.8 type number, we'd certainly sell the rest of the geo bonds. There'd be about 5 million of sales tax bonds and about 3 million of cash. And as you guys recall, you've talked about the cash contribution as tied to a certain project that was expanding your scope a little bit. So as we kind of think through sequencing what's left to issue on the geo bonds, it's 28 million. We are anticipating a little more than 28 million in project funds due to potential bond issue or bond reoffering premium, but we'll need to wait until April of 2026 sale at the earliest to move forward there. So we'll target that, setting up a timeline after the first of the year. Hopefully you'll be on the road to receiving bids, but we'll certainly time that next debt issuance once we know a little bit better bidding timeline. The next key information piece for us is new valuations. So quick things on just in terms of summary. Our interest rate bids were in line with prior financial models, perhaps a little bit better. Keeps your financing plan on track. Continue to deliver on your tax rate promises. I think the results today are positive with respect to project funds and the overall financing plan, but we'll need to keep monitoring rates and valuation growth. We're going to recommend acceptance of the bid from UMB, and they're out of Kansas City, Missouri. So you reference that Allers and Cooney resolution, which was just updated a few minutes before the meeting started. Again, we'll do some fine tuning, a little bit on the commentary component. And then additionally, think about when to sell the next bonds related to when you're going to receive project funds. Certainly, you can continue to move faster before receiving project funds, as we don't anticipate selling all 28 next year on the GO side. Or even if we did, we still have adjustments that we could make with the sales tax. Most districts at this point would wait till you have a project in hand to sell the remaining voter authority. So I'll go ahead and hit pause in the interest of keeping this quick. We do have some supporting data on your financial scenario and the other bids in the appendices to this, but I'll just kind of hit pause now to see if there's other questions that need to be addressed. Tim or Joan, anything I missed from earlier commentary? I did not make Tim or Joan guess on interest rate before we sold the bonds. And if you looked at the timing of the bids, you did have one bidder that submitted like 24 seconds before the deadline, which, that's given a lot of time. We had one last week that was 7 seconds before the deadline. So a lot of confidence placed into the internet speed right now.
I, as just a comment, that was an interesting part of the process to get those submitted through the website and see them kind of pop up. That was pretty cool. We do have a tentative drawdown schedule from the construction, and like when will we have spent this $10 million? And I just shared that because I was thinking about it. I think that's in like June or July, but it sounds like as we need more money, we could go out and borrow after April of 2026.
Yeah. So the plan will be, if everything stays on track with construction bidding, to sell bonds probably late April to close around June 1. So you'll have money on hand as of June 1, whether that's 18 million or 28 million, that'll be the decision that we will want to make in the spring. I should add one other thing as I was thinking through this. I know we'll be working to set work on some budget planning in the spring. There may be some recommendation as to the amount of cash reserve levy that you'll need to look at taking with this upcoming year's budget. We will have a little bit of flexibility to keep adjusting that debt service rate over the next 2 years. Right now, we do have planned a $2.52 debt service levy, but we may work to adjust off of that. But again, all of that trying to stay in line with overall tax rate promises, and we've been working with Tim on some of that planning.
Yeah, I really appreciate your efforts. I know that this came together quickly in the last couple of weeks, and thank you also for, keeping this project dynamic, or we can do bite-sized pieces of debt at a time and big bites. And I'm really proud that we're able so far to keep our promise to voters, and I'm just really grateful for your support and expertise. I don't necessarily have any questions, but board members, I'd like you to speak up if you have questions about this first step.
I have no questions.
Is there any difference in when we need to take out money and how much because we're going with the construction manager at risk?
It gives you a better sense of total project dollars, right? We're not, I think when you lock in that contract price, that gives us a little bit better idea that they're committed to delivering on that cost. I would say the big thing will be looking at cash flow, and if there's any desire to take advantage of more bank qualified debt in calendar year 2027. At this point, I'm going to say that we tried to structure this debt to hit the 10 million of value. There may be more value and what I'll call sleep well at night value of getting all the bonds sold shortly after getting the project so that you can run your construction project out. We still would have some opportunities for bank qualified debt with the sales tax bonds that are in the plan. And again, it all just depends on where contract comes in, on how we line that out. But again, let's get valuations in place, get the project bids, and then we'll have some time to pivot and bring options before the board on how much you want to sell next spring.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
Probably just a reminder, Travis, is the threshold $15 million? It has to be, then the project has to be done within 3 years.
Right. So you have effectively 3 years to spend this current money. If we sell more than 15 million in a calendar year, you will have a 2-year spend down test on that money. And you still have 3 years to spend it. But if you don't meet the certain spending thresholds within 2 years, you will owe or have the potential to owe arbitrage investment earnings back to the IRS, which
Yeah.
essentially means if you earn greater than the bond yield, you will owe the difference between the bond yield and your investment return. So right now, it's going to be close. If the Fed continues to hit short-term rates while leaving in place what I'll call some long-term inflationary pressure, which is kind of what's happening right now, we're seeing long-term rates creep up slightly and short-term rates drop. If that's the case, I don't anticipate that you will actually earn arbitrage. You might be borrowing at, in this case, let's say you're borrowing at next year at 390 and can only invest at 350. We're just not worried about it at that point. Hopefully now you're able to get pretty close to it, but my guess is that it's really tight to be able to make this work. And your bond yield, let me pull this up if I got it. Let's not detour to that part of the conversation. But your bond yield is actually a little bit under the 391. That's the true interest cost, but the bond yield is a little bit lower than that. So your earning threshold, I want to say, is a little closer to like 3.72. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's where your earning threshold is. Other questions before you get to your resolution? And again, I think you'll be able to get this presentation as you kind of work through it. There's a summary of the other bids, and then there's a little bit of information about just how we're currently working through the debt structure on your geo bonds, as well as potential sales tax bonds, and then a small summary of cash flow on your capital expenditure program. So this would be kind of ongoing yearly and pay-as-you-go expenses out of your Pepple Save fund. So again, just some preliminary stuff we put in here. Don't view this as final, but just kind of the initial piece of how we're working on your plan right now. We'll spend some more time in the spring walking through exactly what this looks like when project costs are finalized.
Okay, so just as a reminder of the board, we're still on item 5A, which is consideration of the sealed bids, which Travis has just talked through. And there is a recommendation to award bids in the following item, which is 5B, resolution directing the sale. So does anyone else have other additional questions or comments before we move on in our agenda? Okay, so next we'll move on to item 5B, which is considering formal approval of the resolution directing the sale.
I'll make a motion of the resolution directing the sale of $10 million of general obligation school bonds, series 2025.
I'll second.
Okay, hearing a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Cindy,
Oh,
you do have a roll call vote on this.
Excuse me,
Sorry.
thank you. Thank you, Darlene. I heard you too. We'll proceed with the roll call.
John,
Aye.
Fred,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Carol,
I,
Cindy.
Aye.
Resolution adopted.
Okay, thank you all for your time. That brings us to the end of our agenda, so I'll call the meeting adjourned. Have a great day.
thank you, Travis.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.